Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. We have a special guest with us today. This is Keith Getty. It's great to see you.
Great to be here in Indiana.
You came up from Nashville.
That's right. We more often live there during the year, and then we go back in 2 weeks' time. We go back to Ireland to be by the beach and to hide for the summer. So we're kind of looking forward to that.
Nice. Well, even with the last name Gallagher, I've never actually made it to Ireland, so I have to go at some point.
It's incredible. I grew up near Gallagher's and everything.
Is that right?
Yeah, they're everywhere.
That's right. I should call it Gallagher.
And of course, the company Gallagher's are huge there. So you'll be like royalty.
You
should come.
Awesome.
You probably have your own castle, Mitch.
Well, that'd be nice. Yeah. That'd be great. So I just have to say, I was looking at some of the stats for your career, and it's just astounding the reach you've had and the success you've had with your songwriting and the different things you've done. I saw a stat for 100 million people a year singing your songs.
Our publisher said that recently. I think that was to do with integrity. CCLI, of course, in their territories did the 40 to 50 million stat, but the Song in Christ Alone in particular has had a real reach into what is the explosion of Christianity in Asia. So the likes from South Korea to the likes of the countries like China and India. Mm-hmm. It's a unique story there. So it's been really interesting, but it's been interesting because we've never been able to follow a path. My music, even today, are the hymns that we write, the churches sing, don't really fit any radio model. Mm-hmm. And right from the very start, I remember, growing up wishing I wasn't from Ireland, wishing I was cooler, wishing I wasn't a classical musician, all this kind of stuff. And yet the journey has just been one of taking what it is being a church musician who's a classical musician who's born in Ireland, and the music kind of comes out like that,
Right.
And so in the providence of God, I believe, those parts of my makeup and heritage have actually been what has given our music definition and uniqueness.
Right. So you mentioned all the different classical and church music and coming out of that background, if you will. You started very early, correct? You played classical guitar and flute early on?
How do you know all this, Mitch? You know everything. Do you know my
we do a little homework.
Do you know my national security number?
Yeah, right.
I think you do. So I started at 10, which isn't massively early, but my mum was a piano teacher and my dad was a church musician, so of course I wanted to be a rugby player,
Of course.
But it turns out I wasn't very good at it, and I got into guitar when I was 10, and just got obsessed with the guitar, and then that led back reluctantly to piano. I wouldn't let my mum teach me, and then played the flute. So, but it was a classical career. I got into conducting music and that kind of stuff. And it was, again, another lesson I've learned, as well as is through my failures. Almost, it took me to a journey. I remember I wanted to be a flute player. And then that didn't quite work out. I had 3 disappointments. So disappointment at university, then disappointment in the flute career, and then I became a conductor. I came across to Tanglewood in Lenox, Massachusetts, studied there.
Right.
That was Bernstein School, and which was a real achievement for me at that time, but realized I wasn't going to make it in conducting. And yet all of those things transpired to lead me towards what I did, which was write church music and write melodies, and realized I was actually better at writing simple melodies. But there were melodies by somebody who had practiced for hours. James Galway used to say, who I got to some flute lessons with, he said, play Irish melodies to your plants for an hour every morning. Play hymn melodies. If you can play Irish melodies and you can play hymn melodies well, then you can play Mozart well. So that was what I did every morning for an hour. So
Wow.
like probably 3-4 years of my life were spent 6 to 7 every morning when everybody else in the house was asleep, playing these melodies. And so that went into my being, and I think in some ways has helped inform how I write music,
Right.
So again, didn't make it as a flute player, but I think all of our experiences, both in music and in life, can feed into the unique creativity that gives us our expression as songwriters.
Right. I also imagine it leads to healthy plants.
Well, yeah, happy plans. Depends how good you are. Right. Looking back on it now, I think they may have had mixed feelings.
Well, that's great. That's great advice, because, of course, working on melodies like that is going to give you a real ear for hearing what works as a melody.
It's amazing. And even the conducting career, I tried to angle and focus in on the orchestration side of things, so do more of the pops orchestra thing. Mm-hmm. And we earned a good living at it, and it was good fun to do. But I learned that even that was a preparation, because when you're an orchestrator, you know how the business of our industry works. You only ever get hired to work on the classic melody. They're not going to put you in the radio tune. They're going to put you on the classic melody. Right. So I spent probably 5 years of my life in my 20s just every single day studying what makes a classic melody work. Do you know what I mean? So again, and then at 25, In Christ Alone was the first of our hymns that got recorded. So by 25, we'd had that kind of training of 5 years of playing flute melodies and Irish melodies and 5 years of studying classic melodies, and then that was almost the best preparation, I think, for them being able to write the kind of melodies that we do.
Right. So were you always drawn to do that kind of writing? Was it something that was in the back of your mind or that you had tried before?
Well, I think so. I always wanted to write hymns. You know, I feel, you know, I grew up in a Christian background. I went to university in England, and we debated for people of different faiths, people of no faith, and I became absolutely convinced that this Christianity of Christ who was born and who lived and taught and died and rose was so utterly unique that it actually was the hope for the world, but that actually the age we live in is an interesting age. Charles Dickens once described in A Tale of Two Cities, he describes it as the best of times and the worst of times. And I think that's today for Christianity. Christianity is growing faster in the world than at any point in history. I can demo a song on a Friday in a studio like this, and it can be sung on all 6 continents that Sunday. It's an amazing age to be alive, but at the same time the challenge to Christianity, I think, is deeper and darker and more intense. And so for my generation and for my children, I want them to grow up with a deep belief. And part of how we get our deep belief, part of how we get deep faith is the depth of the songs we sing. That's how it was in the Old Testament, that's how it was in the New Testament, that's how it was for the church fathers, for the reformers, and for the great revivalists. Sure. And so they were deep believers who sang deep things. So I guess that's the dream. That's the dream with these songs, and it was always the abiding passion. It just happened I had to do 15 years of failing at music as a training, to be able to write a tune that goes dum 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 dum.
right. But you had to get to that point. It all does lead up, like you were saying. It all does lead up to that. It's all part of that background. So when you approach In Christ Alone, or a song like that, do you start with the lyrics? Do you have an intent to communicate something? Do you start with the music, or does it all come at once?
It's all. You know this much better than I do, Mitch. But you know, every writer is different, and every writing combination is different. For us, we've always started with melodies, which is less normal. Although it's interesting, most guys who have been entrepreneurial songwriters who are melodists always go first. So that's everybody from Gershwin through to the Rodgers and Hart combo through to Andrew Lloyd Webber. You know, they all started with melodies. Even Elton John, for the most part, started with melodies, and then the other person puts the lyric on top. And in some ways it kind of makes sense, because, you know, from a hymn writer's perspective, melody is still the dominant form of songwriting. You know, some songs are more successful because of their lyric, but melody is the dominant form. From a logical hymn writing point of view, for example, the greatest hymn lyric in the world, nobody will ever sing if the melody's not good. But if the melody's great, we'll sing anything. You know, the words can be as vacuous and predictable, or they can be as poetic and deep as you wish. But so I think it's helped us to try and really focus on. Some people would disagree with that, but I think it's helped us to really focus on getting the melody right and then building something in terms of building functional songs for churches to sing. So.
Right. So do you so you have the melody. At that point, then, are you using your music theory background and your orchestration background to come up with harmony to accompany that, the chords, or is it something you do by ear?
Yeah. It's it's funny. Those days are so far gone now. You know, it's totally what you feel like doing at the time. And then, of course, the thing about songs is, as a song grows, it develops its own arrangement anyway. You know, for us and for other people. The wonderful thing about church music is some people sent us some of our hymns been recorded in Scandinavian churches recently, and the melodies were almost the same, but the harmonies and the rhythms were so different. And that's the beauty of those of us, and I know you know many of the worship songwriters as well. The honour that it is to write music for the church is that you get to hear these wonderful colours from around the world of how people sing them in different ways, and that's kind of exciting. It's kind of weird. The Archbishop of Canterbury at his enthronement in Canterbury Cathedral 4 years ago, Justin Welby, he had the Canterbury Cathedral Choir, and he had the pipe organ and the London Symphony Orchestra, and so as they're all family, we're all there, and they did In Christ Alone, and the arrangement was like done with all these chords and suspensions and all this kind of thing on the organ. It was a formal arrangement, and everyone was going, "Wasn't that hilarious when you heard them arrange it like that?" And I went, That's actually how I wrote it.
Really?
Yeah, well, I did because I was the nerd at the piano doing and then gradually Stuart Townend, who co-wrote it, he simplified it and he made it Stuart always was smarter than I was at most things, and he was able to make it make sense in the contemporary worship genre. And then as various artists, the Newsboys and the Passion Folk and all those folks do their versions of it, they've gradually simplified the harmony. So as the years have gone on, it's become more. So I think that's kind of an idiosyncrasy with writing what is popular songs,
Right.
Popular folk songs because they're meant for groups to sing. So.
Right. Well, clearly it's had a big impact. It's the number 2 most popular hymn at this point. Is that where it's at on the chart?
That's according to the BBC, but
Right.
I mean, who can believe the BBC?
Well, it's also been on the top of the chart for him
CCLI.
since 2006. So it's
In UK, yeah, it's been top 10 in the US. It was top 1 in the UK for 9 years. But it's been a remarkable journey with that song. It seems to still be growing. And honestly, I think the biggest gift that song was for the biggest gift for me personally was that song opened the door for us to say, let's invent hymns for the global church in the 21st century. We now live in this global world with all this wonderful communication that you guys and others do so well. And it's a whole new redefining church music as part of the generation we live in. So to have been given the gift of that meant we could say, okay, let's redefine what it means to write a hymn. The worship songs and praise songs are all great, but we also need a little bit of depth. So let's do that. And so that kind of charged the door open for us to do that. And so we're so grateful, and hopefully can make a good hopefully do it responsibly.
Sure. Well, you've had a lot of success with other songs as well. I mean, In Christ Alone has been huge, but The Power of the Cross and By Faith and some of these other songs that you've written have also been tremendously successful. And listening to those, it seems like you're taking a very serious theological approach to trying to communicate things there. As you're working on the lyrics, then, are you referencing things, or how are you approaching that?
Yeah, most of the lyrical genius is Stuart, and now and increasingly Kristen. They put the lyrics together. I kind of chip in, and they mostly just ignore me or just shut the door, and or tell me to go for a walk or give me a coffee order or something. But they work really hard at it. I mean, In Christ Alone, Stuart did in a few weeks. We just said we wanted a creedal hymn like the Apostles' Creed. How do you create a creedal hymn for the 21st century, which just says in one song the whole gospel story? And that came easy. And then Part of the Cross was really a meditation on Christ's sufferings, but that was we wrote 17 verses to that.
Wow.
17 verses. It took us a year to finish it, and we stopped speaking to each other twice while we were doing it. He wouldn't return my call for ages, and because I always thought the chorus should be da 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 forgiven. I wanted it to crescendo and hit forgiven at the top, and he didn't want forgiven in the chorus. So we were in the end we with the compromise was we stand forgiven. And so it was an interesting heated conversation. But I think that's part of the beauty and the difficulty of collaboration. You get somebody who comes from a different way of looking at things, and they stop you being your own predictable self. But the hard thing for long-term collaboration is that's an intense relationship. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it's interesting. So many. I remember recently I was reading stuff, but I was reading a thing on Paul McCartney, on his feelings after Lennon died, and it was around about the same time that they had Lloyd Webber's 70th birthday, and they said, any regrets in life? And Lloyd Webber goes, none. Then he stops and goes, actually, he says, I wish I could have grown old with a co-writer. And it's interesting, but both of them had very, very public fallouts with their co-writers, just because the intensity is so great.
Right.
And so I think we always have to allow, that extra level of generosity to those that we write with, because it's not an easy process.
Right. Yeah. And you're in particular because you write so much with your wife.
Yeah.
And then you tour and perform and do albums.
Allow her a lot of generosity. Yeah. never criticize her lyrics on a date night.
Right.
That's great.
Words to live by.
Great. Next Monday. Come back to it next Monday. It's Friday night. It's Friday afternoon. We're going on a date tonight. All I have to do is like everything she's doing.
Right.
And it's going to be a good weekend.
Now it's on the video, though. Now she knows. I was joking.
Edit that last bit.
No, but you're right. It is because you're invested in what you do,
yeah.
and the other person is invested in what they do. But you both want the outcome to be as strong as it can be.
No, that's right. But the thing about it is, you're not going to write something creative. Whether you're a painter, whether you're a songwriter or a film script writer, you're not going to write something unless you feel it in the depths of your beings. So this is you're heading for it's that level of intensity, and
right.
and I'm so thankful. I learned a lot from I think having somebody who's a little bit older is an advantage too, because the Stuart Townend relationship, I was always the pupil, he was always the teacher, and so that was there was so much to learn, but then the younger person, you can always bring a bit more energy. I find that even in our company, the younger staff who are 5 to 10 years younger are all frustrated at me because I'm not moving fast enough or don't have enough ambition, and I'm going, wait a minute, for the last 20 years I've been the other guy,
Right.
so you learn, there's working with people, we're created in community. We're created in community. Christians believe we're created in community to make us holy. So whether you're given a wife, you're given kids, or you're asked to go to work every day, or you're asked to live in a community, it's to make you holy, because otherwise you just keep deluding yourself about how good you think you are.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? When actually you're a bit of a disaster, really.
So changing the topic just a little bit. So tell us about how you take the songs once they're written to then put them on your albums, or you've worked with Ricky Skaggs, Alison Krauss, Michael W. Smith, an incredible range of artists, John Patitucci. Tell us a little bit about that process of then taking the song to fruition as a recording.
Oh, well, I've always loved, I think there's two things. First of all, the core of our work is trying to write hymns for churches, trying to give Christians around the world a grammar for what they believe, an artistic grammar, a singing grammar, a singable theology. And so my primary goal is to find songs that churches sing, then find ways of recording them that finds that intersection of being good to listen to and translatable for a congregation. So that's, of course you don't always get it right, and every artistic impression is just an impression.
Sure.
So that's the first thing we do. But the second thing is we then try to make them work as an album. So Facing a Task Unfinished was a good example. We used four, or Hymns for the Christian Life was easy. It was we thought Hymns for the Christian Life, what are we, at that time we were getting excited. We just moved to Nashville, and we're having these parties at our house for Irish and bluegrass musicians where they'd come around and they'd play till like 1 o'clock in the morning, and they just jam tunes, do you know what I mean? And it was a total blast. And so that was actually very inspiring. So we did an album, but most of those guys who would come to our house and wouldn't leave and eat all our food. We got them all. We thought we got to recoup our money on these guys, so we'll just put them to work. So that project, Alison and Ricky and Moya Brennan all agreed to be part. So that was an Irish bluegrass project. That was quite easy. And then the Facing a Task Unfinished project was about how singing fires us to mission and mission around the world. How it's affected the world. And so we wanted to take music from the 6 continents and take a range of different styles. So we thought we wanted to get 4 kind of, I guess in different ways, world leaders in congregational singing. We went for 2 different kind of people. We went for Chris Tomlin, of course, who is the legend of worship music and probably and undisputably the most influential praise and worship songwriter. And then Fernando Ortega, who's Hispanic, but who also has interpreted hymns beautifully. And we love his artistry. He did My Worth Is Not in What I Own with my wife. It's still one of my favorite things we've done. And then we went for 2 people from different fields. We went, I think, it was Ladysmith Black Mambazo. We worked with them, and that was great. It was one of the last things probably they may do. So we managed to catch them, and it was through a good friend. And so they sang on Oh Children Come. And then, as I said, John Patitucci, and John's been involved in our Christmas tour. Each year we do that Christmas tour with PBS, which has been recorded by PBS, but we do it around the concert halls. And John's been involved in it the last 2 or 3 years. He actually turned up at our New York show one year and turned up at the party. And I said, "Aren't you John Patitucci?" And he goes, "Yeah, I like the show." And he said, I was going, "What on earth was he doing at our show?" And he said, "I'd love to play with you guys sometime." And so I went, let me think about that, yes. And so he came back and he did it, and he was amazing. Given the legacy of his career, what I love about musicians like this is their humility to want to just make good music. I remember saying to John, I said, "John, why did you do this project?" And he says, he was taught by jazz by a group of of African American mentors to him, and they always said to him, "John, you only do music you believe in. And once you decide to do it, you've only got 2 jobs. One is to play the most beautiful music you can play, and secondly, to help everyone else in the room play the most beautiful music they can play." And that sense of, I just love that sense of community, of being able to work together. Our band essentially has been the same 7 families for 7 years. A couple of them joined in sort of a couple of years in, but but it's, you know, just to travel with those families and to make music and to constantly trying to improve. I think there's a greater joy in that than just gigging, you know, and
Right.
you know, having the kids in the road and having the embarrassing parents and uncles turn up on the bus afterwards, you know. So I think it's all part of it, you know.
Right.
And that's what makes memories, and that's what really, really humiliates people, and that's what gets you all the funny stories about the past as well. Except when it comes to me,
Right.
then I don't like it.
Right. Well, that's awesome. That's incredible. So I have to ask, and I typically do ask in these interviews when I have an artist like yourself here. You've worked with so many great artists and producers and engineers and throughout your career. What is it from your perspective that makes a great artist?
What a wonderful question. Obviously, there's not one thing. I think I've never been asked that question. I can tell you the musicians who I most admire have got extraordinary gifting and have got an extraordinary vision of what they have to do in life. And that expresses itself in two daily practices. One is the practice to grow the curious gifting that you've been given in life. Because, you know, whether it's Alison Krauss or John Patitucci or anyone really, you know, they actually are very, very, very good at a very, very narrow thing. Mm-hmm. You know, Leonard Bernstein is the exception. You know, and so it's that ability to constantly, every day, want to pour fresh passion into that, to constantly make it better, and always wanting to be growing. And then the second thing is to be able to let everything else in the world go that doesn't do that. As a Christian, I was told by my wife's uncle, John Lennox. John Lennox, of course, is famous for his debates with Richard Dawkins. He's my wife's father's brother. And he introduced us. He always said, as a Christian, always, every day, be trying to make, because I was thinking of becoming a pastor, and he goes, you're a good musician. Why don't you just focus on being the best musician you can be and seeing how God allows you to use that. But also every day saying, how do I make my faith grow faster than my music? Mm-hmm. And of course, how often do we succeed at that? It's almost an impossible thing, but
sure.
It's a wonderful aspiration, and it's a wonderful measuring tool by which we measure each day of our lives.
Right. Because if you aren't examining it, then you're probably not growing.
That's exactly right.
Before we wrap up, I'd be remiss if I didn't offer congratulations. I understand Her Majesty the Queen recognized you with the Order of the British Empire.
Oh, yeah, it was really cool.
Just the other night, right?
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, it was lovely. It's a great opportunity. It's the first time it's been given to someone from the contemporary Christian music world, and I think part of that is Irish, is because I was from Northern Ireland, but part of that is because in Britain the love for hymnody is seen as part of British culture. Mm-hmm. So to be able to sort of reinvent hymnody and repopularize hymnody is seen as contributing to the culture that Vaughan Williams, Sir Vaughan Williams and Sir Arthur Sullivan and all these people throughout British history have contributed so richly to.
Right.
But it was a real privilege, and hopefully we'll make the most of the opportunities that are afforded us.
That's wonderful. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And thanks so much for taking the time. I know you drove up from Nashville to see us here, and we're just so
privilege.
glad
It's
to have
just
you
around
here.
the corner.
Yeah.
5 hours around the corner.
Well, not too bad of a driver. Pretty direct shot anyway. It was great to meet you, and thanks for coming up.
So
we
much,
appreciate
Mitch.
you being here, and hope you'll come back soon.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute. I'm Mitch Gallagher.